So, more extrapolation. Maybe I will finish this notebook. In map consciousness, the brain matter is moving and speaking in a different way than its habitual past patterns. And then everyone says, this person's acting so different. It's just the brain moving and speaking in a different way. And I heard about a book called Deviate, and it's about how the brain has evolved to see things in a biased manner. And that made me extrapolate that there's a manic bias, that to see things in a manic way is actually adaptive. Sometimes I feel like it can be a response to trauma, so it saves a person in a way because one feels in a super meaningless state. So the response to that is to create a hyper meaning state in the brain and give one a taste of something beautiful, and also seeing that beautiful world and trying to create those structures in the brain to make it more easy for one to see that. So in a way, how does one make it easier for one to see that beautiful world and have those structures in the brain, and get rid of the structures that would cause us to dwell in the lower states of consciousness where we might feel depressed or something like that? And all those things are related to the me as well. So it seems like the upper states are selfless states and the lower states are more energy going towards the self and the me. So that book is talking about how perception not being accurate is actually adaptive. And that's what happens in so-called mania. So there was talk about how there's a lot of self-deception going on in our brains that we don't notice. And I wonder if in psychosis, in a way, we are seeing all these ways of self-deception, and it's scary. So we're actually seeing it though. Whereas in normal consciousness, we have these self-deception mechanisms that we don't see. So I feel like those altered states in map consciousness allow us to see a lot of what the self is doing. So then when we're not in those states, perhaps we will see when those structures are operating and drop them, as opposed to continuing to allow them to entertain us. I could say we entertain them, but they entertain us. And can we be done with that entertainment? Because from the map consciousness perspective, we know where that leads. So when we're separate from the self-deception, it's like watching the most terrifying movie. So we can still see it going on, and we wish that it would stop. And I feel like map consciousness is a catalytic state. We become catalysts for something else. We're catalyzing the ability to see this other world and bring it about. It's probably already there in the multiverse. There's so many dimensions. It's just a matter of who sees it, and as they move towards it, with it, then it brings it into more of the energy field of the now, and then other people can see it as well. And in a way, map is entropy of the ego and the self. It breaks it up. And just as food is energy, dialogue is energy, because speaking in terms of perceptions and insights gives energy. And new capabilities arise when pressure is there. And there's definitely pressures on the human being to mutate. And that state is definitely a mutation. There was definitely some kind of download. And it's like waiting for more people to get the download. It's like if there's a new game out there and only a few people have it, and it's a game that you play over the internet, it's not that interesting. But if more and more people get that game and start playing, all of a sudden it's just so cool. I don't play games, I just thought of that example. I do play Carcassonne. That one is fun. In a manic culture, the world would be a playground and not a battleground. And I wrote down that map is like a singularity in the brain. It erases everything. And it doesn't necessarily permanently erase it, but it does temporarily. And I'm wondering if my brain has this sort of thought of alien thing that happens sometimes. At least it did in January. That was so intense and it was really scary. And I wonder if it's that way because in a way that energy is alien. It's a new energy. It's something alien to us. And it's doing something alien. It's breaking down the self or whatever it's doing. Who knows? I'm just making crap up. It could be anything that's happening. And I read a statement that says living things build themselves. So a fetus needs to move in order to develop the motor cortex in the brain. If something can't move in utero, then it won't develop the equivalent structure in the brain. So if we can't move in the right way in this reality, in space-time and gravity, then the right structures aren't developing in our brain, and we're not using our human faculties in the right ways. And just like when a fetus moves in utero, it's chaotic, it's spastic, it's not coherent per se, but those movements create the motor cortex so that the baby can at least learn to walk when it's 1 or so. And so with map consciousness, it's chaotic, it's spastic. We're in that state and we're roaming around and moving chaotically and we don't know what we're doing. But it's developing some area in the brain. So if that other environment came in, if we went from the amniotic fluid of Earth to whatever medium we are to walk in this other domain, well, now we have the brain structures that are there for us to be able to walk there or dance there, whatever we're supposed to do in this other dimension, which is right here, right now. It's just, it's probably chiral, it's probably hidden, it's probably holographic, it's probably quantum, who knows, but it's preparing the brain for something. If we can survive it, because just because there's a fetus growing in a uterus doesn't mean it's going to survive. A lot get aborted before they even come to term, or don't survive birth, or don't survive very long in the first days of life. And it's the same with map consciousness. It's part of life, and life isn't guaranteed. And something really bizarre that I learned is that I was an egg in my mother's womb when she was born. So that wasn't all of me, but half of me was there when my mom was born in 54. And homeostasis has to do with changing ourselves so we can survive in different environmental conditions. So we don't say environment change, so it's always the perfect temperature for my body. We have to be able to cool our body and heat it up. And in a way, I feel like MAP is developing a new homeostasis. It's adapting us to different energy levels in consciousness. So a lot of us operate on this consistent level of consciousness. But in a way, the environment of the planet and of society is changing in such a way that we might need to access a more larger range of the energies of consciousness in order to survive. And I learned that 75% of fetuses die within 8 weeks of conception. I feel like the field of mania could be a field of study. Well, that's all for today. I hope that I sleep okay tonight as well, and tomorrow I'm supposed to pick up a different vehicle, a Chevy Bolt, It's a full electric. So I'll give that one a go. And I will talk to you, as in me, later. One other thing I'll talk about is that I was watching a bit of the 30th video that Steve Pavlina did on his 30-day water fast. So he made it to 30 days on water only. Really impressive. But the topic he was talking about was the one thing. And he was talking about how he read a book called The One Thing, and it is about just focusing on one thing. And interestingly enough, that's what I've been doing with self-dialogue. That's been my main focus, is just doing that, and other things can get incorporated into that. But I pretty much decided to do it for 1 year, and in a month or so it'll be 1 year, and then I'll probably keep going till September 11th to really make it 1 year, because that is the time that I started doing more videos and more days in a row than initially. So that's my one thing focus, and incorporating coming off meds, and hopefully that works. And probably by September 11th I'll have a different thing to do, or I'll keep going with this. But it would be nice if at some point I could change it into traveling around and talking with people who are into alternatives and mental health. There's an alternatives conference in Boston in August, so perhaps I'll go to that, or go to it next year, or start doing something. I don't know. Part of the reason why I just sit and talk to myself is because it's a lot more friendly to the finances than traveling around and doing all this kind of fancy stuff. But we'll see. It would be cool to document starting a respite center. It would be cool to do a lot of things, and hopefully this will just lead into other things that I would like to participate with.